There is something about winter that changes the rules. It's the snow swallows sound. The darkness comes early and stays long. The roads close, the phones lose signal. And whatever might be out there in the world with you, whatever might be watching from the tree line, pressing against your window, moving beneath the ice, winter gives it exactly what it needs: isolation, silence, and nowhere for you to run. Tonight, we have 3 real accounts, 3 stories submitted to us by people who survived what they experienced but have never been the same since. The first comes from a couple who rented a remote cabin for a quiet winter getaway and spent the night barricaded inside, listening to something circle their walls. The second comes from a search and rescue team that found a missing man alive, but wished in some ways that they hadn't. And the third comes from a father and son ice fishing trip that ended with footage no one has been able to explain to this day. These are not urban legends. These are not campfire tales, polished smooth by retelling. These are raw, first-hand accounts, the kind that stay with you not because they are dramatic, but because they are quiet and specific and completely, devastatingly real. My name is your host, and this is True Terror Files Official, your #1 source for the most bone-chilling true encounters ever documented. Before we begin, make sure you are subscribed so you never miss an upload. And if any of these stories feel a little too familiar, if something in your gut recognizes what these people went through, leave it in the comments below. We read every single one. Settle in, turn the lights down low if you dare, and whatever you do, do not look at your windows. Let us begin. Emma and Jake had been planning the trip for 6 weeks. A long weekend at a rented cabin near Blackthorn Ridge in northern Vermont, the kind of getaway you book specifically because it is remote. Because the listing emphasizes quiet and seclusion and the absence of neighbors. Because after months of city noise, you want to be genuinely, completely alone. They arrived on a Friday afternoon in early February. The drive up the mountain road taking longer than expected due to light snowfall that had started an hour outside of town. The cabin was exactly as advertised, a small A-frame structure at the end of a gravel road, surrounded on 3 sides by dense pine forest, the nearest town 14 miles back down the mountain. They brought enough food for 4 days. The first evening was everything they had hoped for: a fire in the wood stove, dinner by candlelight, the kind of peaceful silence that feels like a reward. They went to bed early. Emma woke at 2:14 a.m. to the sound of the wind picking up. The forecast had mentioned the possibility of heavier snow overnight, and she lay still for a moment, listening to it press against the cabin walls. It was when she sat up to check her phone that she noticed the window. Their bedroom window faced the tree line to the north, and in the white ambient glow of fresh snowfall, Emma could clearly see the ground outside, and she could clearly see the footprints. A single set of tracks, human-sized, coming from the tree line in a straight, deliberate line directly toward the cabin wall, stopping just beneath their bedroom window. She woke Jake. He pulled on his boots and his coat and opened the front door, phone light out, scanning the perimeter. And that was when they saw that the tracks did not stop at the bedroom window. They continued, circling the entire cabin in a slow, deliberate loop, passing each window in turn. Pausing at the front door, the depth of the impressions here slightly deeper, as if whoever made them had stood still for a moment, and then continuing on, looping again. 2 full circuits around the cabin, and then the track simply stopped mid-stride. On the eastern side of the building, as if whoever had been walking had stepped up and off the surface of the earth. There were no tracks leading back to the tree line. There were no tracks leading anywhere. Jake barricaded the door. They sat with their backs against the interior wall, stove burning, not speaking, listening to the wind. At 3:40 a.m., they heard something on the roof, a slow, scraping drag, moving from one side to the other, methodical, unhurried. It stopped. At 4:15, something pressed against the front window with enough force to flex the glass inward slightly. Jake pointed his flashlight at it and saw nothing but darkness and snow. They did not sleep. When gray dawn came, they packed everything and got to their car and drove down the mountain without stopping. It was Emma, looking back at the cabin as they rounded the first bend in the road, who noticed it, something she had not seen in the darkness the night before. Built high in the pine trees directly facing the cabin's bedroom window, close enough to have an unobstructed view inside, was a hunting blind. Solid, weathered, old. And sitting on its platform, clearly visible even from the road, was a thermos. When the property owner was contacted, he said he had never built a blind on the property and had no idea it was there. Local authorities went to investigate it 2 days later. The blind was gone. The thermos was gone. Only the cuts in the tree trunks remained, where the platform had been bolted in. Sarah had been on the county search and rescue team for 8 years, which meant she had been on dozens of winter calls, lost snowshoers, skiers who pushed too far into the backcountry, the occasional hiker who had underestimated the speed at which the mountains close in when the temperature drops. She had seen things in those 8 years that were difficult, and things that were sad, but nothing that she could not ultimately explain within the framework of what she understood the world to be. That changed on the 7th of January, when her team was called in to locate a missing snowshoer named Derek, 31 years old, experienced, who had set out alone on a marked trail near Coldwater Pass and had not returned to his vehicle by nightfall as scheduled. His emergency beacon had been activated at 4:22 p.m. and then gone silent. The team deployed at dusk. 6 members split into 2 units, following Derek's GPS trail on their own devices into progressively deeper wilderness. The trail was clear for the first 2 miles, his snowshoe prints in fresh snow, consistent pace, no signs of distress. It was around mile 3 that the prints changed. It became irregular, widely spaced as if he had been running, then suddenly, it was completely normal again, as if he had stopped and resumed a casual walk. A quarter mile further, the prints ended. Not at a cliff, not at a stream crossing. They simply ended mid-stride, in open, flat terrain, with no obstruction, no ledge, no hole in the ice. His gear was there, arranged with extreme care in the snow. Snowshoes crossed, poles laid parallel, packs centered, gloves placed precisely on top. His beacon was in his left glove. The arrangement was so deliberate, so composed, that Sarah stood looking at it for a full 30 seconds before her training kicked back in. They spread out from that point and began a radial search, and it was Sarah herself who found what she would describe, in her official report, only as structures of unknown origin. Branches, pine, heavy, freshly broken, had been arranged in lines leading deeper into the forest. 3 parallel rows forming a corridor, extending for approximately 40 meters before turning once and continuing. They were too precisely spaced to be wind damage or animal behavior. The team followed the corridor. At its end, sitting against the base of a large spruce tree with his knees drawn up and his eyes open and fixed on the middle distance, was Derek, alive, uninjured, hypothermic but not critically so. He did not respond to his name. He did not blink when Sarah knelt in front of him and shone her light in his eyes. He was breathing steadily. His pulse was normal. and he was looking at something in the space between the trees that none of the 6 team members could see. He was airlifted out and made a full physical recovery. He has never spoken about what happened in that forest, not to his family, not to the investigators, not to the therapist he saw for a year afterward. He simply says he does not remember anything after mile 2, but the footage tells a different story. 3 different team members had body cameras running throughout the search, and when the footage was reviewed the following week, all 3 captured the same thing. At the edge of frame, in the trees, at a consistent distance of approximately 30 meters, moving whenever the team moved, stopping when they stopped. Something large, something upright. Watching. It appears in 11 separate clips across 3 different camera feeds, always at the periphery, always just far enough away to remain undefined. Wildlife experts consulted on the footage ruled out every known animal, so the footage has never been explained. Derek knows about it. He has been shown it. He watches it without expression. And when asked whether what is visible in the trees is what he saw that day, he simply looks away and does not answer. Thomas had been fishing the same lake with his father since he was a boy, and he had been bringing his own son Caleb since Caleb was old enough to hold a rod. Mirror Lake in northern Minnesota was their place, remote, accessible only by a Forest Service road that most people did not know existed. With ice thick enough by mid-January to drive a truck on, and walleye so abundant in its deep center basin that they rarely went home without a full cooler, they set up their tip-ups on a Saturday morning, 8 holes in a rough grid pattern, flags upright, Caleb running a GoPro on a selfie stick through one of the center holes to film whatever moved through the water below. The first day was ordinary and good. Productive fishing, no wind. The temperature a stable -12, which was cold but manageable. They pulled their tip-ups at dusk, went back to their truck, slept. When Thomas walked out onto the ice on Sunday morning at 7 a.m., he stopped walking and stood completely still for almost a full minute before he called Caleb over. All 8 tip-ups had been moved, not fallen over, not disturbed by a fish strike moved, pulled from their holes, relocated and replanted in new holes that had been punched through the ice during the night, arranged in a perfect circle roughly 8 meters in diameter, centered on the deepest part of the lake. Thomas had not made those holes. The ice around each new hole was smooth and unbroken, no tool marks, no disturbed snow, as if the holes had appeared from beneath. They stood at the edge of the circle looking at it, and Thomas made the decision they should pull everything and leave. Caleb asked for 10 minutes to get the GoPro footage from the previous day, and Thomas agreed. Caleb lowered the camera through one of the circle's holes while Thomas began breaking down their equipment. He pulled the camera back up after 3 minutes and looked at the LCD screen to check the recording, and he held it out to his father without saying a word. The footage from the center hole, recorded the previous day during fishing, showed the lake bottom in its first minute's sediment. A few suspended particles, a walleye moving lazily through frame. Then, at the 22-minute mark, something entered frame from below. It was dark, massive, moving with a slow, purposeful motion upward toward the underside of the ice. And then it stopped, directly beneath the camera lens, and the footage showed 2 things clearly and in unmistakable detail. It was pressing against the underside of the ice with what could only be described as hands, and it was looking up at the camera. Fingers spreading slowly, one by one, against the ice from below. Thomas dropped the camera into the snow. The two of them ran for the truck without looking back. Caleb had left the GoPro running as he ran, and the final 20 seconds of footage shaking, capturing the ice surface receding as they sprinted, shows the ice in the center of the circle dropping inward, sinking as something beneath it pushes upward. There's a single frame, blurred with motion, in which something dark and large and partially visible clears the surface of the water. Thomas and Caleb have submitted the footage to 3 separate agencies and have had it reviewed by wildlife experts, sonar specialists, and independent investigators. The footage has not been identified as a hoax. The contents of the footage have not been explained, if not returned to Mirror Lake. They do not discuss what the thing looked like in that single blurred frame, only that both of them saw it clearly, and that it is not something that belongs in any lake, in any season, in any world that they recognize. 3 stories, 3 winters, 3 moments when the cold and the dark gave something else the cover it needed to get close. Emma and Jake moved out of state 6 months after that February weekend and have never rented another remote property. Sarah transferred to a different search and rescue district the following spring. Thomas and Caleb have not spoken about Mirror Lake in over a year, not to each other, and not to anyone else. Some experiences do not make you stronger, they just make you quieter. If you have a story like these, something that happened in the cold, in the dark, in a place where you should have been alone and were not, send it to us. The address is in the description. Subscribe to True Terror Files Official so you are the first to hear what comes next. Like this video if it reached you somewhere it was not supposed to. And stay warm tonight. Stay inside. And whatever you hear moving out there in the snow, do not open the door.